Okay, we now have then the electric distribution companies panel all at the witness table. I trust that you all have signed the green sheet, the hearing report form. Okay, very, very good. All right, so if you will all stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right, please be seated. I ask that all of the witnesses speak loudly and clearly so that you can be heard not only here in the hearing room, but also the audience on live stream. As stated before, you are to state your name, your title, for whom you are employed, and on whose behalf you are appearing here today. And our first witness is C. James Davis. Mr. Davis?
Yes. My name is C. James Davis. I'm the Director of Rates, Energy Procurement, FERC RTO Affairs for Duquesne Light Company, and I am representing Duquesne Light Company today. Chairman DeFrank, Vice Chair Barrow, Commissioners, again, thank you for inviting us to this conference and this hearing. Duquesne Light Company is an electric distribution company serving Pittsburgh and the surrounding region. It is my pleasure to participate today in the conversation of this important topic. Duquesne Light has proudly served the Pittsburgh region for over 100 years, including serving as an important catalyst for economic growth and development through the height of the heavy industry, the decline of the steel industry, the rise of higher education, world-renowned medical institutions, and to the more recent evolution of the city as a hub for cutting-edge technology in robotics, autonomous vehicles, and now artificial intelligence. As the region has transformed and continues to evolve, Duquesne Light stands ready to reliably and safely meet the needs of the community it serves. Data centers, and specifically artificial intelligence, is transforming how we all live and work. But the extreme energy demand of data centers, if not managed correctly, could result in grid impacts and unintended shifting of costs to other customers. To put this energy demand into perspective, consider that in 2024, Duquesne Light's network service peak load was nearly 2,700 megawatts. A hyperscale data center will commonly range from 60 megawatts to several hundred megawatts. There are a few examples within Pennsylvania where hyperscale data centers have the potential to scale up to 900 to 1,000 megawatts. A single data center could account for as much as 30% of the current peak load in our entire service area in Allegheny and Beaver counties. Duquesne Light is committed to supporting large load growth in the Pittsburgh region while ensuring adequate generation supply, reliability, affordability, and the safety of the electric grid. Equally important, Duquesne Light seeks to avoid unreasonable cost shifts to other customers. Adhering to long-standing principles of cost allocation ensures affordability and fairness in electric service rates. In today's economy, it's more important than ever to focus on affordability for customers. My comments today are intended to inform the Commission on how best to foster economic development and beneficial load growth while appropriately preventing unreasonable cost shifting. At the onset, it is important to note that large load may be served by the distribution or transmission system. Large load customers may also seek to co-locate at the site of the generation resource, bypassing both the distribution and transmission system. Depending on the point of interconnection and the configuration, there are different procedures and cost implications. Duquesne Light will further expand on these issues in our written comments. Today, my testimony focuses on best practices related to serving large load at the distribution level. While I will offer insights into Duquesne Light practices, it is also important to maintain flexibility as we contemplate works best for Pennsylvania, diverse grid, and unique characteristics. Today, I offer two recommendations for the Commission's consideration. First, the Commission should minimize unreasonable cost shifting by adhering to cost allocation rules to protect existing customers from bearing the cost to support new large load customers. And second, the Commission should ensure reliability of the grid by requiring large load customers to bring their own generation. As it relates to cost, the cost of studies and infrastructure upgrades must be supported by large load developers, and those costs are directly caused by the customer, when there is no material benefit to other customers within the class. Duquesne Light's existing interconnection requirements require large load developers to bear the cost of studies and infrastructure investment needed to serve that customer so that those costs are not socialized to other customers. Doing so is consistent with longstanding cost causation principles in rate making. Where cost causation is clear and can be directly allocated to a customer, it is appropriate to do so. Under the existing tariff, Duquesne Light requires a deposit in order for a large load developer to be assigned a position in the queue. This deposit pays for engineering and interconnection studies and is fully refundable if the customer decides not to move forward, less any costs already incurred. Those large load developers also pay the actual cost of construction, referred to as open book cost. These include direct and indirect costs plus applicable taxes. This practice ensures that Duquesne Light's existing customers are protected from paying for projects that never come to fruition. The tariff provides clarity in the process to protect prospective customers as prepared to negotiating individual contracts with each individual large load customer. Duquesne Light's Rule 4 in the tariff allows for customers to pay over time through an adder in the bill with interest. This is another tool the company has to encourage investment in economic development while ensuring that costs are not shifted to other customers. DLC maintains that consideration for contract size minimums and contract duration can ensure customers pay their fair share over a longer duration, regardless of their actual load. For example, provisions allowing for ramp-up considerations or minimum charges can be used by a utility. However, it should be noted that minimum charges may change how individual customers' network service peak load tags are assigned. Some examples include minimum charges based on percentage of the customer's highest monthly billing demand over a past number of months, or a percentage of the customer's contracted demand. From the generation perspective, with the context of potential generation shortfalls in the PJM region, Duquesne Light recommends that large load customers be required to supply primary generation in order to reduce the impact the large load has on current customers and the larger grid. While the idea of bringing your own generation has promise, the specifics of this may be implemented should be well defined to ensure that there are not unintended impacts on other customers in a larger grid. Considerations for further dialogue include what is a large load, and the guidelines can be established to sufficiently apply across all EDCs and territories. Second, should the power supplied be new generation that is added to the grid rather than a power purchase agreement pulling generation from an existing source? For example, new generation could include new construction, restarting retired generation, or generation uprates in the capacity of existing resources. It is DLC's view that the new generation should be added to the system to offset the demand of the new large load. Third, is the availability of generation matched up with the energy demand of the load? For example, a PPA with an intermittent solar facility that produces during daylight hours cannot offset the demand of a 24/7 data center. While DLC supports the growth of new, clean, renewable generation, which benefits the grid, for the purposes of today's discussion, we're focused on generation that is available to push electrons onto the grid anytime the data center is pulling electrons from it. Fourth, should there be an operational consideration for whether generation is solely dedicated to serving that large load, already on the grid under a PPA, or on-site and available to backfeed onto the grid? Fifth, should rules and operational controls be put in place to dictate what happens if companion generation is offline? For example, does that load go offline also? Or is the grid expected to serve it? At the distribution voltage level, Duquesne Light has a rate to cover the backup service that covers all the costs associated with maintaining that infrastructure. It does not have a current similar structure on large load customers interconnected to the transmission system. Finally, should large load be required to, or incentivized to shed load at the peak periods? In closing, the Duquesne Light Company commends the PUC for initiating this proceeding and looking forward to further engagement on the best practices that can be implemented in the Commonwealth to guide large load development. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's hearing, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Again, all written testimonies of all of the witnesses have been marked for identification and admitted into the record and into evidence in this particular case. Next, we have Ms. Gower.
Thank you. I'm Kelly Gower, Vice President of Finance and Regulatory for First Energy Pennsylvania, or FEPA, and I will be commenting on behalf of FEPA today. Chairman DeFrank, Vice Chair Barrow, and Commissioners, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding the interconnection issues that are starting to manifest as data centers and other very large loads locate into Pennsylvania. Our former distribution operating companies, MedEd, Penelec, Penn Power, and West Penn Power, consolidated in January 2024 to form FEPA. Altogether, FEPA serves approximately 2.1 million customers in 56 of the 67 counties throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It is important to note that for purposes of today's discussion, preceding and as part of the January 2024 consolidation, each of the transmission systems once owned by any of FEPA predecessor companies are no longer part of FEPA, but rather helped form a collection of affiliated transmission operating companies under the First Energy Corp umbrella. Today I will be testifying to you about the unique qualities that certain new large load customer requests have and the challenges that those qualities present as compared to our typical large industrial load for which our processes have traditionally been designed. Traditionally, large customers apply for retail service through FEPA, which initiates a process that involves preparing detailed load studies, or DLS, that are provided to the customer. This study process takes into account customer and system-specific details such as location, proposed diversified loads, basic project technical information, and any thermal or voltage violations this new load would cause to the grid in its current state. The DLS process not only provides for review of the technical solution to supplying service to the new customer, but also determines proper cost allocation between the customer, FEPA, and the transmission company. The technical outcomes of the study include the full scope of work required to mitigate any identified violations, work required to extend the electric grid to the point of interconnection while supporting the project's redundancy requirements, and the estimated cost and timeline to complete the work. The cost allocation review identifies network transmission facilities, distribution facilities costs, and the contribution in aid of construction, or CIAC, that the customer would be responsible for paying. The DLS document provided to the customer describes a plan for interconnecting the customer's load, the costs of the facilities that are necessary to connect that load, the allocation of costs between the transmission company and FEPA, and the CIAC costs that are to be paid by the customer. If the customer accepts the plan and chooses to move forward with the project, a construction services agreement, or CSA, is executed, and the customer must pay the associated costs for its share of the upgrades required before engineering and construction begin. While transmission-level retail customers see FEPA as their service provider, FEPA must coordinate with and ensure ongoing service for these customers through the applicable transmission owners serving each customer's location. As a result, most large load requests not only invoke the standards, rates, rules, and policies of FEPA, but also those of the transmission owner, which are governed by FERC for transmission service. One specific area in which this applies in the determination of whether new transmission assets are needed to support new customers should be classified as transmission network versus non-network facilities, which hinges on several key characteristics defined by FERC, which I've explained more thoroughly in my written testimony. The costs for transmission network facilities that meet one or more of these criteria are shared across all customers who benefit from them. Since 1994, FERC's policy has held that network facility costs are to be recovered via rolled-in transmission rates charged to all customers that are served by the transmission network. By contrast, facilities that do not meet one of these characteristics typically would be classified as non-networked, with the costs borne solely by the customer benefiting from them. The new class of large load requests are distinct in several key respects from the traditional large user. First, the speed to market expectations of these applicants are often accelerated significantly when compared to other typical new service applicants, including requests for shortened or fast-tracked study timelines. Nonetheless, we determine the applicant's place in the queue of incoming interconnections in the same manner as any other applicant based upon the date when the DLS agreement is executed and the study fees are paid, and each application must await completion for other studies ahead of it. Once studied, there can be significant lead time on materials critical to those applicants' connection to the system and the need to secure an outage window through PJM in order to complete the necessary construction. This can be a frustrating realization for applicants whose ramp-up time is faster than the average large user, where timing expectations often do not reflect the current supply chain and regulatory process realities. These requests also require larger interconnection service capacity with higher costs to build the facilities necessary to serve their loads, and are often situated in geographic areas where electrical systems were not designed to support load needs anywhere near those that are being now requested. This often requires significant transmission build-out, which must first be analyzed thoroughly and can involve substantial network investments. Where a customer self-funds necessary upgrades, the payment covers the utility's capital investment, meaning that both transmission and distribution utilities are required to expend significant operations and maintenance resources from application through construction without the opportunity to earn a return on their efforts, as compared to investment that is otherwise necessary to maintain the physical and financial health of the utility. Where system upgrades are treated as networked, other concerns arise. While the utility's capital investment rolls into rate base for recovery through rates charged to all customers, there may be corresponding increased costs to all customers as the rate base that is the basis of the utility's rates grows. The industry has comparatively little experience with new large load customers, and consequently, it is difficult to understand the entirety of the system impact without extensive study. It is difficult. For example, there are open questions as to whether these large loads will materialize on schedule, whether they will persist for many years, and whether they will reflect high load factor patterns of usage or variable usage. Overall, the goal of the company is always to balance affordability concerns with reliability and resiliency needs as best possible. The team at First Energy has been exploring solutions on behalf of its family of companies, including reviewing solutions that have been leveraged in other jurisdictions in a workable way for all stakeholders. For unbundled rates like Pennsylvania, no one solution squarely falls within the state or federal jurisdiction, but rather the parameters of both must be accounted for. Potential options include, but are not limited to, incorporation of critical tariff provisions, rate-making structures, and siting approvals. Further, the degree of complexity in addressing this challenge increases in certain respects in the case of FEPA, where the distribution utility is not the transmission utility. For example, if ultimately a construction agreement is required to address both transmission and distribution service, then the agreement likely will need to be signed by the customer, FEPA, and the affected transmission utility. And the agreement also will likely need to be filed with and approved by both the PAPUC and FERC. As described earlier, related to the typical interconnection process, and as we're seeing in other jurisdictions, this is predominantly handled through contracts, outlining the critical provisions of necessary upgrades, expected load, cost allocation, and security, while living within the confines of all applicable regulatory and tariff requirements, as well as system planning policies and requirements. Our review demonstrates that the industry is still in the early stages of dealing with each of these concerns that I've outlined, and that more work needs to be done to address the FERC and stake elements that are in play. We appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today and work with the Commission, our peers, and other stakeholders through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gower. Next, we have Richard Webster.
Yes, I'm Richard Webster. I'm Vice President of Regulatory Policy and Strategy, and I'm representing PECO Energy here today. Chairman DeFrank, Vice Chairman Barrow, and Commissioners Zerfus and Coleman, thank you for the opportunity to testify here today regarding issues of critical importance to the Commonwealth. I would like to commend the Commission for holding this important hearing on the opportunities and challenges raised by the proliferation of large load projects that are seeking to locate in Pennsylvania. Like the resource adequacy proceeding the Commission launched in November 2024, today's hearing represents an important opportunity to discuss critical energy issues facing our state. As Chairman DeFrank noted in his motion to initiate this hearing, large load customers such as data centers present opportunities for economic development, job growth, technological advancement, rate stability, and strengthening our national security. PECO embraces these opportunities and is actively working with customers, legislators, regulators, and other stakeholders to bring these benefits to its customers in the Commonwealth. Accompanying these opportunities are challenges to the electric distribution companies' systems that will serve these large load customers. PECO, like other public utilities in the Commonwealth and across the nation, has been evaluating these opportunities and challenges and how we can best serve our current and future customers. We are learning from our own experiences with large load customers and gathering additional information from our affiliates at Exelon and other peer utilities. We value the opportunity presented today to share our perspective and hear from the Commission and other interested stakeholders. While large load projects are important to the applicants and to the communities in which they are seeking to locate, they also have the potential to impact other customers. PECO takes seriously its obligation to provide safe, reliable, and affordable electric service to all customers and appreciates that the Commission has initiated this discussion to appropriately balance serving large load customers in the Commonwealth while protecting other customers. To aid in the Commission's consideration of designing a proposed model tariff, my testimony is focused on some of the most significant challenges PECO has experienced in connection with large load customers. First, many contemplated large load projects are substantially larger than customer projects we have served in the past. PECO is working with a number of large load projects that are considering connecting to PECO's distribution system. 4 of these projects, which have reached an advanced stage, would potentially increase PECO's overall peak demand by 3.8 gigawatts, resulting in an almost 40% increase in the demand on PECO's distribution system. PECO is also studying an additional 24 proposed large load projects that, if implemented, would add another 8 gigawatts of demand to our system. This potential demand growth is unlike anything we have dealt with before and is a major departure from almost 2 decades of relatively flat growth. Second, the number and the size of these projects makes it challenging to evaluate their potential effects on the distribution system. Large load projects have the potential to impact multiple EDC service territories as well as regional transmission systems, resulting in an extremely dynamic modeling and an analysis environment. This means that it may be necessary to study proposed projects in groupings or clusters, and impact analysis completed one day can be altered the next day by an interconnection request filed in another regional transmission system or even another state. In addition, the number and type of required interconnection studies and agreements can vary situationally based on site-specific and customer-specific parameters, which may limit the degree of short-term certainty that EDCs can provide to these customers on the time and the cost of new interconnections. Load profiles for data centers can also be quite different from those of other types of large customers, such as industrial customers, and even the load profiles among data centers customers can vary depending on the customer's potential to hyperscale or provide increasingly mobile service over time. Third, the advent of large load customers is occurring in the context of a rapidly evolving external environment. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, regional transmission organizations, independent system operators, and state utility commissions across the country are evaluating issues associated with the proliferation of data centers. Some states are competing for data center and artificial intelligence-related development, while others may be considering imposing barriers on or guardrails around such development. Large load development is also susceptible to the persistent supply chain and workforce challenges impacting large infrastructure development more broadly in our nation. And economic uncertainty has the potential to alter the speed and trajectory of demand growth. Data center and artificial intelligence technology are also rapidly evolving, adding uncertainty to projected energy demand forecasts. In short, change can occur quickly in this space, and the future is uncertain. In the face of that, PECO has maintained a consistent and straightforward approach to evaluating potential large load customers. As with all Pennsylvania EDCs, PECO's distribution interconnection processes are implemented through retail tariffs that treat all customers in a non-discriminatory manner consistent with state laws and regulations. After a potential large load customer contacts PECO, the customer is referred to our economic development group. The company's current process is to provide the customer with an inquiry form so that PECO can obtain information regarding the customer, the contemplated project, and its electric and gas service requirements. The customer will also be asked to provide preliminary drawings and site plans. At a high level, there are 3 phases to connecting the customer. Phase 1, conducting an engineering feasibility study. Phase 2, performing detailed design and engineering. And Phase 3, completing construction to connect the customer to the company's distribution system. If a large load customer seeks to proceed with an engineering feasibility study, it will be required to submit a deposit to PECO that will be utilized to pay for the initial analysis. PECO currently requires a $250,000 deposit. If the customer cancels the project, any unspent funds will be returned to the customer. If the initial deposit is not sufficient to pay for the study, the customer will be required to pay the difference between the initial deposit and the actual study costs. This process helps establish the viability of potential projects by requiring prospective applicants to demonstrate a financial commitment that is directly tied to PECO's investment of time and resources and protects existing customers from unduly subsidizing the project. Prior to moving to Phase 2, the company will determine, and the customer will be required to pay to PECO, the customer's required contribution in aid of construction, or KAYAK. Total construction cost and KAYAK will be determined in accordance with Section 7 of the company's electric tariff. As a general matter, customers are responsible for costs necessary to upgrade service to deliver the power they need, while system investments that provide benefits to broader customer base are socialized through the rate-making process. The company may also require the customer to submit additional financial security, such as a letter of credit. This process is intended to balance the interests of new and existing customers and to protect existing customers from the potentially stranded costs that could arise if PECO were to invest tens of millions of dollars in grid upgrades for planned large loads that do not materialize. For example, while applicants for new and expanded service are entitled to a credit against PECO's estimated total construction costs of their connection equal to the anticipated distribution revenues from that customer over the first 5 years after connection, if the customer's future load does not generate those expected revenues, PECO can recover the difference from the new large load customer to avoid imposing additional costs to existing customers. If large load projects are added to the grid in a responsible manner, these projects can bring a multitude of benefits to our communities and our customers. They have the potential to create jobs that support the local workforce. They may also be able to leverage sites with existing infrastructure and available capacity, and the amounts these customers pay for ED service and connection may ultimately have the effect of decreasing system costs for other customers over time. As we have already seen in Pennsylvania, these projects can also drive reactivation of generation facilities that were determined to be uneconomic just a few years ago, creating additional jobs. We are proud of PECO's collaboration work with large load project developers to advance projects in PECO's service territory. Our interconnection process evaluates large load customer opportunities in a manner that is fair and equitable to all customers. Our regulatory environment should always consider cost causation principles and require all users, including large loads, to pay their fair share of the cost of building, maintaining, and using the grid. In conclusion, the size, scale, security, and speed to market needs of large load data center developers are unprecedented, and dialogues like this hearing are essential to understanding the challenges and the opportunities associated with serving these customers. Other states are exploring these issues as well, and engagement with our peers through the regulatory and industry organizations can assist us in identifying best practices to optimize growth opportunities. The Commission should provide EDCs flexibility in developing practices and procedures that are consistent with the public interest and that will encourage growth while providing existing customers with appropriate protections. PECO looks forward to continuing to collaborate with the industry, regulators, legislators, and stakeholders to seize key opportunities that benefit all customers and to work through the challenges that these opportunities present. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Next, we have Mr. Lookup, Joseph Lookup.
Thank you. My name is Joseph Lookup. I'm the Vice President of Transmission and Distribution for Planning and Asset Management for PPL Electric Utilities. I am representing PPL Electric Utilities today. Good afternoon, Chairman DeFrank, Vice Chair Barrow, and the Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of PPL Electric Utilities on the issues around interconnection and possible tariff considerations for large load customers. As recognized in the motion, data centers and their load represent a significant opportunity for Pennsylvania, including job growth, economic development, and bolstering our national security. In addition to these load additions also have potential to lower rates for all existing customers, while enhancing the reliability and rate stability for all. PPL Electric has invested in the reliability and resiliency of the transmission system to better serve customers. An added benefit of this investment is the company stands ready to serve the influx of load. In fact, we have 9 gigawatts of new load under agreement today, at more than double our territory's peak load. When interacting with the prospective large load customers, perhaps the biggest question that we hear is not about the transmission capacity, but whether generation capacity will be sufficient to serve this increased load. While not directly the subject of this hearing, any PUC policies that arise from this docket should consider the impact that data centers will have on resource adequacy, particularly the effects on the capacity, cost, and the system reliability. To that end, I'd refer you to PPL comments on resource adequacy and the EDC investment in generation related to the PUC's November technical conference. When addressing the issues around interconnection of large load customers, PPL EU has been using our existing retail tariff. Data centers have predominantly taken service at or above 69 kV, which is the LP5 rate schedule for PPL Electric. Depending on the point of interconnections, data centers and other large load could require upgrades to the bulk electric system, which benefit not only these customers directly, but also the transmission and distribution system as a whole. As such, rather than require all upgrades to be funded by the new customer, cost causation dictates the need to segregate costs into 2 categories, either customer-specific costs paid through KAYAK and other costs socialized through the FERC transmission rates. These allocators are determined on a case-by-case basis based on whether they provide reliability benefits to the grid or solely benefit the new customer. PPL Electric shares the Commission's desire to protect ratepayers against the risk of stranded costs associated with large load customers. While it is in our intent to memorialize large load interconnection rules in the retail tariff, at some point in the future, we have found that useful the flexibility and timeliness of memorializing individual load guarantee terms, payment schedules, termination fees, and other important consumer protections in our customers' electric service agreements. In addition to KAYAK's obligation, customers guarantee to take the service in an amount that ensures customers pay electric service rates equal to upgrade the costs that are socialized through the transmission rates. This obligation is secured by a letter of credit or other form of security. Any termination fee in the difference between the cost placed into rates less the revenues received from the interconnecting customer, and these are important protections for our broader customer base. In working with these customers and determining how to equitably move forward, projects and their obligations are evaluated based on whether upgrades will be placed into rates and socialized, not based solely on megawatt size. PPL EU also does not have any minimum contract terms. Rather, any guarantee length depends on the cost, load ramp schedules, and projected monthly revenues. These policies not only align with the industry best practices, but also appropriately balance data center growth while mitigating existing customer risk. PPL Electric supports this inquiry and is interested in the PUC guidance around interconnecting large load customers. While data customers are driving most of the investment in the near term, this may not always be the case. Technological innovations and advancements in manufacturing sectors may necessitate other solutions not being contemplated today. Because of the latency in the market and the issues that are still emerging, PPL recommends issuing guidelines through the policy statement rather than adopting a model tariff at this time. Pursuing a model tariff that acts as a one-size-fits-all regulatory regime may be transparent, but also may be too restrictive, which hinders innovation and flexibility when designing demand response or interruptible load provisions. Having a policy statement that outlines minimum requirements can provide boundaries that offer direction for developers while also ensuring the right level of consumer protection. PPL Electric is committed to a fair and efficient process for interconnecting large load customers, including data centers. To that end, we support policies and methodologies that strike the right balance between encouraging data center development for the state and protecting customer interests. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lookup. Now, the second panel, having presented their testimony, Mr. Chairman, I ask if you and the Vice Chairman and the other commissioners have any questions for them.
I do. Thank you, Chief. I do have a few general questions, and I will be brief, but I wanted to ask a few specific questions based on testimony to make sure I didn't misunderstand something, particularly James. In your testimony, you testified that large loads should bring their own generation. So when you do that, you're talking about a co-located situation. So are you saying backup generation then?
No, I'm actually saying, in this case, it could be backup. I believe the economics may be a little bit more prohibitive of that. I'm actually talking about grid-connected generation.
Okay. So it's similar to, say, a Crane Center deal or something like that with Microsoft, PP?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. And then, Kelly, I had a question regarding your testimony, and that was contribution to native construction. So if we have a situation where an end user is building out some of the infrastructure, I thought you made a statement regarding the rate of return on that. Does First Energy have some concern of that because you aren't earning an ROE on that? Did I hear that right?
You did, yes. So because of that, that kayak goes directly towards the investment. That investment does not go into our rate base.
Okay.
At that point, it completely offsets the cost, but does not allow for the opportunity for return.
Isn't that what's happening now, though? So say I am a developer and I build a housing development. I put underground wiring in, electric wiring, and I do that at my cost, and then I turn it over to you. At some point, that's an aid in construction, correct? So that's coming off of your rate, your revenue requirement.
Correct, yeah. So what we're describing today is how we do it today, right? So that's what.
So you still roll that into rate base then, even though it's an aid in construction? Is that what you're saying?
No, anything covered by native construction is not included.
Is not rolled into rate base?
Correct. And because of the magnitude of these types of investments, that's a large chunk that's no longer in rate base.
Right, but it would still be a infrastructure that's benefiting that one customer, not
Correct.
the overall grid, correct?
Correct.
So you still want to earn a rate of return on equipment that only benefits one customer?
No, and that's what we would need to work through as we partner through this. My testimony was meant to explain what's currently done with any customer that comes to us to connect.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Real quick for all four of you, large load size. If I can get a number, what is the number we should be looking at for what we would consider a large load user? Is it 50 megawatts? Is it 100 megawatts? We've heard even the first panel, one testifier says 75, I think one said 50. Thoughts?
I don't think we have a formal position on that yet. I mean, the smallest data center that we're dealing with is 150 megawatts, which is 50% larger than our largest customer. So 75 or 100.
And I hear you. When we were looking at the motion, and we reached out to IECPA and found out there aren't a lot of users at this level of load. Your especially steel plants, you name our manufacturing facilities that are energy intensive, and we haven't been able to find too many that's this size of load. Okay. Interconnections. Can you walk me through the interconnection process and basically how long for each of you it takes basically on a study side, and then I guess it would depend on what build out is necessary, but I'm not even sure any of you even got to that point where you're actually building out. I think you're all in basically study phases, is that correct?
Yeah, so just given the differences in all the projects and fact that this is new to all of us, and sometimes the scope of the projects change. I can't give you exact timing, but we are transparent in terms of how long it's going to take to do the initial engineering studies. And then, one of the things that we're looking at now is looking at a number of projects as clusters. We think that's a good idea that, is a smart way to approach these, but makes it a little more complicated. And then, all this is sort of in PECO's shop, heavily the analysis on the transmission side. These will have to go through a PJM review, and for those of you that are interested in radical transparency, you'll get a look at them when they reach that part of the process, and that's when they're really materializing and agreements are in place and they're real, and then at some point we'll get to doing the detailed design and then the construction. So it's a high level of where we are on those 4 big projects that have become real.
Would any of you like to share sort of timeline for at least that study side?
Yeah, from the study side for PPL electric utilities, we break it up into 2 different phases. So we have an initial rapid response time frame. That's usually in 1 to 2 weeks that we give a order of mag, schedule, budget, and feasibility of the point of location. And then after that, we have a feasibility period that I would say ties into typically 1 to 3 months during that time, and then after that, it really coordinates with PJM's process, which from some of the previous testifiers, I mean, that's typically a 3-6 month time frame during the study phase.
Anyone else want to add to that? Good. Finally, self-build. Again, I think that's an interesting concept. If first off, the question is, will that provide speed and connectivity for your systems if the end user is doing part of the build out, obviously with your supervision, making sure that that build out meets your system specs. Will that result in a quicker interconnection? And, we talked about this being in contributions and aid to construction for rate making purposes. What other sorts of arrangements could exist for an end user doing their own build out that may not be a contribution aid to construction? And I'm not even sure there is any. I'm just asking some of the experts here.
I'll jump in a little. So I am familiar with where the projects have made contributions to long lead time materials, as I think we heard earlier today. I'm not familiar with any self-construction that is in the mix, but we'll comment on that in our formal comments.
Yeah, I would say long-term, I think we would be interested in, the reliability, resiliency of the grid to make sure it meets our specifications. Today, we don't get a lot of requests, I'd say, for building out on their own. I'd say that's partially because we're the experts, on the bulk electric system with the grid, the equipment. They definitely do offer opportunities for long lead material, stuff like that. They're definitely offering up as needed. Today, I don't believe it would expedite the build out on our side. I think we've been able to meet the demands for the customers to date.
I just echo what my colleagues say here. I think it's really important that, again, as we work through the detailed process and understand, make sure the specs are correct to protect the resiliency and affordability of the grid. So I agree with my colleagues.
Okay. And I would echo that same sentiment. My colleagues probably are a little bit further along than Duquesne Light with these types of data center projects. We haven't seen very many at this point. So we're learning as we get the projects in, but I do echo their comments.
So regarding self-build, do you see any advantages to that?
I'm not sure that
No?
we...
The way I would look at it is it's certainly going to insulate the ratepayer, right? We don't really have to worry about stranded costs. If you guys aren't paying it, then I don't have to worry about it being passed on to the ratepayer. So that's one advantage that I see sitting here right off the bat, right? Any others?
Yeah, I would just say that it is separated, right, from a kayak where the customer is paying for their fair share when it only directly supports that customer. Any other benefits? Yeah, you'd probably have to ask others outside of here. But I mean, from our standpoint, again, it's keeping the reliability for the grid, yeah, I think that.
Great. Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Barrow.
Thank you for your testimony. So, Joe, you mentioned you recommended that the commission do a policy statement and not a model tariff at this point. What kind of flexibility would you like to see remain that you believe a model tariff is going to rule out?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a changing dynamic, right, in the market. So I don't want us to make sure that we have restrictive hinders to be able to innovate as a utility. I mean, I think PPL prides themselves on innovation, right, whether that's with a technology side or a cost side. So I think we want the opportunity to be able to provide that flexibility for all customers. And again, it not only benefits the large load customers, it benefits all customers to bring this load on. So I think that's where we're looking for minimum requirements, and a lot of those minimum requirements are put into our electric service agreements today. So we just want to make sure that we have we do not have too restrictive, again, on being able to innovate and the flexibility for consumer protection.
What about the rest of the panelists? Is that kind of the consensus, or is?
We're open to we're open to having a data center tariff. The way I look at it now, it'd probably memorialize the terms that are already available to us and to customers in our tariff, but it might be easier to put it in one place, and there might be some unique things that I've seen in other states that you would want to pull in. I worry about changing the rules while we're trying to work through these projects right now, but I would be open to it, and then we would potentially adopt it either unilaterally or if the commission were to move in that direction.
Okay. And speaking of flexibility, you heard some of my questions to the earlier panel about differences in collateral requirements that they're seeking. Have you noted, just based on the large customers that you're working with, is there a difference between, for example, a crypto facility versus someone like an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Google versus a company that's just hosting a third party's servers? Do you see a difference in risk, like as far as them just pulling up stakes, moving to another state, anything like that? Do you tailor your contracts differently based on who they are?
I think there are differences in risks in customers, and we deal with that with various companies that we deal with, and it'd be a similar approach in dealing with data center developers.
Okay. One more question. What tariff design features, should we get to the tariff design? I hear some people don't want that. What tariff design features, for example, minimum load factors, monthly demand floors, that kind of thing, have proven the most effective in ensuring reliable forecasts for your companies from these large load additions?
In ensuring reliable load forecasting?
Yeah.
Oh, you turned yourself off.
Yeah, so I mean, minimum load commitments, right, within the contract, if that's your question, Vice Chair, is definitely something that we believe strongly, right, from a policy and is in our agreements today. I think that helps from a reliability and resiliency, so you have a commitment from a load, but then also, again, from the consumer protection side.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'd say more, relative certainty to the certainty regarding the project and the revenues and the associated costs, and that would also benefit the load forecast going forward.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Zerfus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I actually had a couple of questions as they related to like clean energy procurement or like distribution transmission planning processes. I'm not going to do those. Just going to skip right over them because honestly, I want to go back to this policy statement versus model tariff issue that came up in Mr. Lookup's testimony. Can you walk me through this again? Like, I'm having a tough time understanding why one versus the other when both of them, neither of them are, cemented and they're not in cement, like they're guidelines. Like, can you go through this again for me?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what I said before, I mean, I think it really is just the market conditions, right? It is ever changing. One of the reasons we're sitting here. So we want the flexibility to be able to solve it in different ways long term. Yeah, I mean, I think we could follow up with additional comments as required, but it really is for the flexibility for all customers for us, but being able to respond to the large customers appropriately as the market changes. And we think that provides benefits, right, to Pennsylvania as a whole.
Yeah, I just don't see the difference between a policy statement and a model tariff. Both are suggestions, right? Neither are requirements. You could do it, you could not do it, you could build upon it, you could take away from it. I see them as synonymous almost, so I just couldn't get past that. So I think we might just agree to disagree. That's my question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have no further questions. Chief, we are going to break for a quick 5 minutes before our next panel if we can, and we will be back here at about 3:48.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.